We've all heard the saying, history is written by the victors. But that's not the whole story. It's also edited. We're told the Civil War was a clash of great generals, Grant and Lee, Sherman and Jackson, and epic battles with names that still echo, like Gettysburg and Antietam. But what if the most important stories, the ones that truly shifted the balance of the war, have simply faded from the page? What if the spies who turned the tide, the soldiers who fought for their own freedom against impossible odds, and the ordinary people who risked everything have been forgotten? For over a century, the stories of some of the most crucial figures in the entire conflict have been overlooked. These aren't just footnotes to history. These are the men and women who stared down the barrel of a gun, who walked into the lion's den, and whose courage redefined what it meant to be a hero. Their stories were perhaps too inconvenient, too challenging, or they just didn't fit the simplified narrative we were all taught. Today, we're pulling those stories out of the shadows. Today, we reveal the forgotten heroes of the Civil War. In the heart of the Confederacy, Richmond, Virginia wasn't just the political capital, it was the nerve center of the Southern war effort. And inside that nerve center, an intelligence network was growing. One so effective and so secret that Confederate High Command had no idea it was bleeding information from the inside out. This network wasn't run by a trained military officer. It was run by a wealthy, eccentric Richmond socialite whom high society had dismissed as Crazy Bet. Her name was Elizabeth Van Lew. Born into a prominent slaveholding family, Van Lew was an unlikely Unionist. After being educated at a Quaker school in Philadelphia, she developed a fierce abolitionist conviction that put her at odds with her entire world. When Virginia seceded, she didn't flee north. She stayed, figuring she could do more damage from inside the enemy's capital than from outside. Her first moves were humanitarian. She and her mother started visiting Union prisoners at the notorious Libby Prison, bringing them food, medicine, and books. This earned her the scorn of her neighbors. The Richmond Inquirer condemned them for expending their opulent means in aiding and giving comfort to the miscreants who have invaded our sacred soil. Men would shake their fists in her face on the street, but the threats only strengthened her resolve. What her critics saw as charity was actually the start of a sophisticated spy operation. Van Lew was gathering intelligence from the prisoners, information about Confederate troop strength, movements, and morale. She helped them plan and execute daring escapes, using her family farm and a network of safe houses as way stations on a new underground railroad. Her actions soon caught the attention of the Union Army. In late 1863, General Benjamin Butler, a key Union commander, officially recruited her. Elizabeth Van Lew, Crazy Bet, was now a spy master for the United States Army. She leaned into her eccentric reputation. It was the perfect cover. She'd wander through Richmond's markets, muttering to herself, her clothes slightly disheveled, a vacant look in her eyes. The Confederate authorities just saw a harmless spinster, which allowed her to move about the city with a freedom no one else had. But beneath that facade was a mind of steel. Her spy network grew to over a dozen agents, a mix of black and white Unionists hiding in plain sight. They were clerks in the Confederate War and Navy departments, a mayoral candidate, even local farmers. They communicated using complex codes and invisible ink, with messages tucked into the hollowed-out soles of shoes or baked into loaves of bread. But Van Lew's most valuable asset, her secret weapon, was a woman whose name has been almost completely erased from history, Mary Bowser. Bowser was born into slavery in the Van Lew household. Elizabeth, true to her beliefs, had freed her family's enslaved people and had even sent Mary north to be educated. When the war began, Mary Bowser returned to Richmond with a singular mission. Posing as an illiterate servant, she got a job inside the Confederate White House, serving President Jefferson Davis himself. Every single day, Mary Bowser walked the halls of the most protected building in the Confederacy, She served dinner to generals and politicians, silently clearing their plates as they discussed troop movements and strategic plans. They saw her, but they didn't see her. To them, she was just part of the furniture. They spoke freely, assuming she couldn't possibly understand their complex conversations. They were catastrophically wrong. It's said that Mary Bowser possessed a photographic memory. At night, she would allegedly sneak into Jefferson Davis's private study to read the military dispatches left on his desk. The intelligence she gathered was priceless. She'd pass it to Elizabeth Van Lew through a series of intermediaries. A laundress would pick up dirty linens from the Confederate White House with coded messages tucked inside. This information then made its way through Van Lew's 5-station relay network to Union lines. Through Bowser, the Union command learned about Confederate deployments, logistical weaknesses, and political infighting. The intelligence was so precise that General Ulysses S. Grant later credited them, stating, "You have sent me the most valuable information received from Richmond during the war." This wasn't a game. If they were discovered, they would be executed. The Confederate counter-espionage service was ruthless. Yet for 4 long years, these two women, one faking madness, the other faking ignorance, operated one of the most successful spy rings of the war, striking a deep blow to the Confederate war effort. After the war, though, their story was buried. Van Lew died in poverty, ostracized by the city she had betrayed to save the Union. Mary Bowser's story is even more tragic. For decades, her contributions were almost entirely forgotten, a ghost in the historical record. Their bravery was an inconvenient truth in a nation trying to reconcile, so their names were allowed to fade. While some fought in the shadows, others were demanding to be seen on the battlefield for the first time. When the Civil War began, it was a white man's war. President Lincoln and the War Department initially refused to arm African American men, reflecting the deep-seated prejudice that ran through the Union. The common belief was that black men lacked the courage and discipline to be effective soldiers. But as the war dragged on, as casualties mounted, and as abolitionists like Frederick Douglass fiercely argued for the right to fight, the thinking began to change. With the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, the door finally opened. The United States Colored Troops, or USCT, were born. By the end of the war, nearly 180,000 black men would serve in the Union Army, making up about 10% of its total forces. They fought in more than 400 battles, but they were fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against the Confederates and one against the prejudice in their own army. They were put in segregated units, almost always led by white officers. They faced constant discrimination, and most insulting of all, they were paid less. A white private made $13 a month plus clothing. A black private was paid $10 a month and had to pay $3 out of that for his own uniform, leaving him with just $7. It was a policy that screamed that the government they fought for believed their lives were worth less. If captured, the danger was even greater. The Confederate government declared that black soldiers could be enslaved or executed on the spot. To put on the blue uniform in the face of all that was a profound act of courage. It was a declaration that they weren't just fighting for the Union. They were fighting for their own freedom, their own humanity, and their own citizenship. And no story captures this better than that of Sergeant William Harvey Carney. Carney was born into slavery in Virginia in 1840. His family was eventually freed and moved to Massachusetts, but the desire to see all his people liberated burned within him. He had planned on a life in the church, but when the call for soldiers came, he saw a different path. "I decided the best way I could serve God," he said, "was by serving in the military to help free the oppressed." In March 1863, he joined one of the most famous regiments of the war, the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, the first all-black unit recruited in the North. On July 18, 1863, the 54th was handed a near-suicidal mission: lead a frontal assault on Fort Wagner, a heavily fortified Confederate stronghold guarding the entrance to Charleston, South Carolina. The only approach was a narrow strip of sand, a killing field between the ocean and a marsh. As the 54th charged into a storm of cannon and rifle fire, the casualties were horrific. The soldier carrying the American flag, the regimental color-bearer, was hit and fell. In that era, the flag was everything. It was the unit's rallying point, the symbol of its honor. Losing it was the ultimate disgrace. As the flag-bearer stumbled, William Carney, just feet away, saw the stars and stripes start to fall. Without hesitating, he dropped his rifle, scrambled through the hail of bullets, and grabbed the flag before it hit the sand. Shot several times, he pushed on, holding the flag high and urging his comrades forward. He planted it at the base of the fort's walls, a defiant symbol of their advance. The attack was ultimately beaten back, and the survivors had to retreat. Carney, bleeding heavily from multiple wounds, began the slow, agonizing crawl back to the Union lines, holding the flag aloft the entire time. He refused to let it go. When he finally made it to a field hospital, he handed the flag to another soldier of the 54th and, before collapsing, said the words that would become legend. "Boys, I only did my duty. The old flag never touched the ground." Carney's bravery was a powerful answer to all the racist lies told about black soldiers. His heroism inspired not just his fellow soldiers, but the entire Union war effort, helping to recruit more black men. His injuries were severe, and Carney was honorably discharged in 1864. For his actions at Fort Wagner, he was promoted to sergeant, but his greatest honor came much later. In May of 1900, William Carney was awarded the Medal of Honor. While other black soldiers received the medal before him, his actions on that bloody beach were the earliest to ever earn the nation's highest award for valor. The story of the USCT is one of fighting for a country that didn't yet fully see them as citizens. They proved their valor time and again, earning 16 medals of honor by the war's end. Their protest for equal pay finally shamed Congress into action in June 1864, granting them retroactive pay. Yet, for decades, their contributions were downplayed by lost cause narratives that tried to erase the role black soldiers played in securing their own freedom. Their fight reminds us that courage wasn't only found on the battlefield. For some, the greatest risk was just doing their job, standing their ground when no one else would. The Battle of Gettysburg is the most famous battle of the Civil War. Its heroes are legends: Chamberlain on Little Round Top, Hancock on Cemetery Hill, Pickett leading his doomed charge. These were generals and colonels, men who commanded thousands. But the battle's critical first moments, the actions that bought the Union Army precious time to secure the high ground and win the fight, rested on the shoulders of a single, little-known artillery lieutenant. His name was John Haskell Caiff. On the morning of July 1st, 1863, the Union Army was scattered, racing towards the town of Gettysburg. The only Union force there was a single cavalry division under Brigadier General John Buford. Buford's mission wasn't to win a battle, but to delay the advancing Confederate army long enough for Union infantry to arrive and occupy the strong defensive ground south of town. His cavalrymen had rapid-firing carbines, but they were badly outnumbered. To sell the bluff that he had a larger force, Buford needed cannons. He had just one battery, Battery A, 2nd U.S. Artillery, 6 light cannons commanded by Lieutenant Caiff. Caiff was a professional, a West Point graduate. He was young, but he was already a veteran of brutal fighting at Antietam. As the 1st Confederate infantry appeared on the Chambersburg Pike, Buford gave Caiff his orders: spread your 6 guns out along McPherson's Ridge to create the illusion of a much larger artillery force. It was a desperate gamble. Caiff's tiny battery would be facing entire brigades of infantry and would soon be in a duel with a much larger number of Confederate guns. As the Confederates advanced, Caiff's guns opened the battle. His cannoneers worked with terrifying efficiency, their rifles firing with a speed and accuracy that stunned the Southerners. The combination of Buford's cavalry carbines and the thunder of Caiff's artillery made the Confederate commanders pause. They thought they were facing a major Union force, not just a few thousand cavalrymen and 6 cannons, so they halted their advance to deploy into battle lines. That hesitation was exactly what Buford and Caiff needed. It bought time. For 2 agonizing hours, Caiff's battery held its ground. Confederate artillery arrived and opened a punishing fire on his exposed position. Shells burst overhead, killing horses and wounding his men. Caiff moved his guns constantly, shifting them along the ridge to keep the Confederates guessing. He kept his cannons smoking hot, a stubborn, defiant bulldog refusing to let go. His fire was so effective that it broke up Confederate formations before they could even start their attack, buying more precious minutes. Eventually, the sheer weight of numbers began to tell. The Confederates renewed their assault, and Buford's cavalrymen were slowly pushed back. Each time, Caiff's battery provided the crucial covering fire, hitching up his guns under intense pressure, falling back to a new spot, and immediately reopening fire to slow the pursuit. His guns were the backbone of that delaying action. Without them, Buford's line would have collapsed in minutes. By the time the Union First Corps finally arrived, Caiff's men and Buford's cavalry had been fighting for hours, holding off a force many times their size. Caiff's stand on McPherson's Ridge had been essential. It gave the Union Army the time it needed to see the importance of the high ground, Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill, and to move troops into what would become an unbreakable defensive position. For his gallantry, Lieutenant Caiff later received a brevet promotion to captain. After the war, Caiff remained in the Army. In a fascinating twist, he later turned down a promotion to captain in the 10th U.S. Cavalry, one of the Buffalo Soldier regiments, a move that reflects the complex prejudices of the era. His legacy, however, is cemented on that field in Pennsylvania. When the monument to General Buford was dedicated at Gettysburg in 1895, 4 of the actual cannons Caiff's battery used that day were built into its base. As the story goes, John Caiff himself was there to personally spike the guns, ensuring they would stand forever as a silent tribute to the man who commanded them and the delaying action that helped save the Union Army. The stories of Elizabeth Van Lew and Mary Bowser, of Sergeant William Carney, and of Lieutenant John Caiff aren't just historical footnotes. They represent thousands of other untold stories from the Civil War. They prove that real heroism isn't just found in official reports or on the statues of famous generals. It's found in the quiet courage of a spy risking the gallows in her own hometown. It's found in the fierce determination of a soldier fighting not only for his country but for the recognition of his own humanity. And it's found in the steady nerve of a young officer whose actions in the first hours of a battle changed its entire outcome. These are just a few of the stories that have been buried by time. They've been forgotten not because they were insignificant, but because they challenge the simple narrative. They show us that heroes aren't just found leading armies, but in every corner of a nation's struggle, in the shadows, on the front lines, and among ordinary citizens who choose to do extraordinary things. History isn't a fixed monument, it's a living story. And it's on us to keep telling the parts that have been silenced. These stories deserve to be remembered, and there are so many more just like them. Who are the forgotten heroes you think we should cover next? Let us know in the comments below. Your suggestion might just become our next investigation. And if you believe these stories need to be told, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more revealed history. Thank you for watching.